I think a lot of consultants would make great product managers, and a lot of my colleagues have come from consulting. So I think first, right off the bat, consultants make great product managers. Some of the skills that consultants have that are very, very translatable and relatable to being a PM are seeing the big picture. Consultants are great for understanding trends, breaking down a very meaty problem and setting strategic direction. That's exactly what a PM does. They have to understand where the industry is going, where people are spending, or just Square in general, how people are spending money, what their purchases are, what their behaviors are, and then how it all fits into the competitive landscape. That's exactly what a PM is supposed to do, have to set a vision for their product and their business. I think where consultants will, freak out a little bit is when they come into the role and they realize that they need to turn that vision into a roadmap. That is the part that is extremely difficult, at least for management consultants, where when you set a strategy, let's say in 5 years, the industry is going a certain way, the product vision says we need to be an open platform that allows for customers to buy and sell. That is a great strategy. But what does that mean for year one? What does that mean for year two? And then if I double click on year one, what does that mean for week one? In week one, out of 52 weeks in 1 year, what do you need to achieve? What do you need to build from an engineering perspective? Because engineers cannot interpret your 5-year vision and build it into a product. A product, let's take iPhone, for example, or Instagram, for example. An engineer has to build that into code. So code can only be Boolean, binary, right, wrong, black, white, ones and twos, ones and zeros. So what is the line of code that engineer needs to build is what a product manager has to essentially answer. And that's the biggest gap between being a consultant and a PM, is translating the vision into a roadmap, into digestible chunks for engineers to build and develop. You have to be a cheerleader, a visionary, a project manager, and then also a multitasker. You have to be really just good at everything. And I can give you some examples. A PM is kind of the focal point of a design and engineering team. Design and engineering are really focused on delivery. And what I mean by delivery is designers will put a lot of thought and a lot of effort into creating the product experience, drawing up wireframes, talking to customers. Engineers the same way. After they get the designs, they will make sure that it can be delivered technically, the code can be actually developed, and it works with the rest of the organization and other products because it's a multi-product team. They are focused on delivery, and the PMs are really focused on the what and the why. So PMs have to be a cheerleader because they have to convince that the designers and engineers that this problem is worth solving. So some of the questions that you'll have to answer are, why are we building this? What am I building? Should I build something else? What's the point of this? Like, those are actual questions that designers and engineers will ask, and I get asked those questions all the time. So as a PM, you need to be a cheerleader because you need to understand the facts and you need to motivate the team. You have to be able to understand the big picture and then also be able to just roll up your sleeves and do things. There's a lot of unglamorous parts of being a PM. I think the Silicon Valley product group, SVPG, really brought home the term that a PM is the CEO of their product. I would disagree with that because a CEO really has authority, and a PM has no authority. I think that might be difficult to hear for a lot of PMs, but a PM is the person that cheerleads, but when things get delivered, we do not take the credit for it. The engineers and designers have to take the credit for it because they built it. And when things go well, the PMs are, the best PMs should let the teams take that credit. And when things go bad, the PMs should be first to defend the team. So when you roll up your sleeves, you really have to be able to dig into the numbers, sell that vision. When things go wrong, shield your team and protect your team. And when things go right, let them take credit. I always feel like a PM is synonymous to being a coach. When things go right, the team takes the credit. When things go bad, they fire the coach. PMs have that same role where you really are supporting the team and you're leading from the back. You're helping your team move forward. But but you're also running in the front and running into the thick and thin ahead of your team to make sure that you unblock them to get their job done. PMs have a couple of different roles, as I mentioned before. At the end of the day, we are business owners and we own the product. For example, I am the owner for Square Point of Sale, which means that I am responsible for all aspects of Square Point of Sale. If it breaks, I own that. If it does well, I own that. If it doesn't do well, I own that. PMs have to be able to see where the product or where the industry is going in 5 years to make sure that the product is relevant in 5 years. It's still useful to customers. It's still delighting them. So we not only own the revenue, like the business metrics, but also the customer experience. We have to be able to, deliver a good product experience, a good user experience, and you can measure that through NPS and CSAT scores, where someone gives you, 5 stars out of 5 stars, 4 stars out of 5 stars, but you can't trade that off for business metrics like revenue and business goals. I try to draw that distinction because you could always build a big business, but not deliver on user experience, and those businesses will fizzle out very quickly. For example, if I start selling, fake bags, if I sell fake bags, I can make a lot of money. The bags might break, but I can make a lot of money in the short term. But over the long term, people will hate my product, and then they give it a really low score. Eventually, I'm going to run out of sales. On the flip side, you can't only deliver on product experience and not focus on the revenue, because then you run out of money. So PMs have to be able to balance between delivering a great product experience and delivering on the business goals. Yeah, I would highly encourage people considering a PM role to, dig deep inside and think about if that's really what they want. And then secondly, if that's really what they want, think about what industry they want to be in. And industry is important, is because each industry is very different. Software is different from hardware, product management, very different from category management, very different from it's just very, very different. Imagine building an app on your iPhone is going to be quite drastic differences to someone building a water bottle versus building a SaaS product or building a Netflix, like a movie production. So you have to pick the right industry. The way that I describe it to people is through a metaphor of surfing. If you know you want to surf, you still have to pick the right wave. And if you pick the right wave, the wave will carry you. But if you pick the wrong wave, you're heading in the wrong direction. So I would encourage people to think about whether they want to be a PM and then in which industry. The way to get into being a software PM, which is the only industry that I've been a PM in, so that's the only one I can speak about, is be interested. And there's a distinction between being interested and being interesting. Being interesting is you're doing it because your friends are telling you it's cool, but being interested is actually diving in and understanding that topic. Read books, read blogs, read articles, listen to podcasts, talk to people, watch YouTube videos, surf LinkedIn and look what other people have done. When you're fully educated on that industry, you'll be much more prepared to understand, at least from your internal motivations, whether that's something you want to do. If you really want to get into the interview process from a recruiting perspective, there's several tactics you could use. The first one is, your day old, just send out a million applications and hope somebody bites. The second one is what I recommend people do is take mini steps. If you want to eventually be a PM at Google, you have to understand that it's very hard to get into Google being a PM. So there's many steps along the way. Let's say in 8 years, 10 years, you want to be at Google being a PM. You need to frame yourself to understand that the next step is not Google. The next step is probably a PM role at a smaller company, at a startup, or at a mid-tier company. And then the role after that could very much be Google, but you need to learn in stride. When you get to the recruiting process, there are a lot of books available. One is called Cracking the PM Interview, which is very popular. Some that I've known people use are YouTube videos. If you go to YouTube and you search Facebook PM interview or Google PM interview, those companies break interviews down by product strategy and product execution. And there's set questions. They're very standardized type of interview questions, but they're also very, very difficult. You could watch YouTube videos that are about an hour long where PMs in those roles do mock interviews, so you can see how they break down the problem. and answer questions on the fly. And those are really great ways for people going through the recruiting process to get a sense of what it's like being in the process itself.
No.
Yeah, I think, yeah, books, blogs. I don't have any secret formula for that. It's really just read the blogs, read the
So I want
books.
to ask,
If you
what are
Google
product
for best product management books, there's probably like 5 or 10 that you really need to read and get a good sense of it. Those are great for theory, but if you really want to practice, essentially practice for an interview, I would say the YouTube videos are the best, and the Facebook product strategy and product execution videos are very, 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 very helpful. Just a quick preview. What those videos will be is 2 people on the call. It would be an interviewer and a mock interviewee, and the question would be something along the lines of, "You are now the PM for Facebook. How would you improve it?" And the interviewee needs to talk for 40 minutes or 50 minutes, and that's how it works in real life. And if from my personal perspective, talking for 40 minutes about any topic is very difficult, especially in front of an interviewer. So there are obvious cues and structures that someone can follow when answering questions like that. And I recommend those videos for actual interview prep. Yeah, I would say big tech interviews are extremely standardized. There's standard interview guides, interview gates to pass. So at Square, the process is, there's standard hiring manager screen, then you would meet a bunch of people from the team. If you pass that, then you go into this case study. So these case studies could be take home, could be live. Take homes are, if you were a product manager for Facebook, what would you do? Come back with a case. Or it could be the 40-minute, 45-minute type of Q&A question that I described before. Those interviews are very exhaustive and mutually exclusive as well. And what I mean by that is, if you meet 6 people at an interview, chances are they're going to ask you different questions. And those questions will be different, but also the same for each interviewee. The interviewer will ask us the same 6 questions so that they are standardized questions, and they make sure they cover every single topic. Some of those questions would be around your ability to break down a problem. That could be the first question. The second one is, how do you work with engineering? How do you work with design? What are some product design principles you have? If you had a product, how do you monetize it? How do you increase revenue in a company? How do you decrease revenue in a product? So each interviewee will get the same question to make sure that each interviewee is on a level playing field, if that makes sense. They usually head on to be head of products and VPs of products, so you can keep climbing the product supply, the product chain. Some PMs that come from engineering could go back to engineering and be head of engineering. Very often, PMs will become heads of businesses. My previous head of product ended up going to another big tech company, and now he's the VP of all of the products. I've seen people move to VPs of a certain business line. So PMs, the general career path is staying in the business, either in the product discipline or overall business leadership.